Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Pfeiffer. I'm a composer and a musician and a member of Musimagem. And it's a great pleasure that we are going to talk about the career and the great music of David Mansfield. With me, I will have João Batista. He's also a composer, writer, director, and member of Musimagem. And of course, our special guest, David Mansfield. David Mansfield is an American composer and musician born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Son of classical musicians, David is formally trained as a violinist. At the age of 18, he joined Bob Dylan's band for 4 years and recorded 3 albums. In the 80s, he was invited to write the music for the notorious epic Heaven's Gate. After that, he had 4 more collaborations with director Michael Cimino, which resulted in a Golden Globe nomination for his wonderful score for Year of the Dragon, a movie that had a screenplay by Oliver Stone. David has written scores in a multitude of styles for around 75 audiovisual productions, and he has continued his career as a composer and musician in many styles, performing and recording with a wide range of renowned singers and musicians. So, David, can you talk more about how was your first experiences with music and when you decided that it was going to be your profession?
Well, I grew up during the 60s, and well, I guess to start off with, my parents were classical musicians, so there was always music around. I was affected by music as a toddler, as a baby. I reacted to it very strongly. It was something that always excited me. But then when I was 8 or 9 and the Beatles came to America, I decided there was nothing else I was ever going to do. And so I spent my childhood playing pop music, playing rock and roll, and I was steadfastly fixated on being a professional musician from the time I was probably 12. That I just knew that's what I didn't want to do anything else with my life.
Wow.
And you know, I just very lucky that actually happened. You know, like that's what I've been doing since then. and the whole thing with film composing and television composing, I did something that is very commonplace now, where people that were in bands, that were performing musicians and arranging for bands, that they moved from that into composing for film and television. A generation before me, if you weren't a conservatory trained, dedicated classical composer, you weren't going to be able to make a transition into that career.
Right.
But when it happened to me in 1980, there were very few people that were coming from that area. You know, it was just starting.
Right. So you had a connection both with pop music, rock, and classical music, right?
Right. Yeah. Oh, excuse me, just 1 second.
Of course.
Yeah. No. Okay. It's fine. Yeah. I was, you know, my whole life I've actually gone back and forth, being deeply involved with both. And I was never really I was never a symphonic musician. I mean, I studied violin, but I made my living performing in the pop world.
All right.
But early on in my career, I mean, when I worked with Michael Cimino, the work I did with him aside from the very first film, Heaven's Gate, it was all large orchestral scores, which was something that was always very natural to me. That's something I grew up with.
And do you think it's important for a composer to have like this connection with different styles of music, a film composer?
Yeah, I think that's really essential. I mean, I think for a film composer, it's almost essential that you find some way to connect with almost every and any type of music. You know, like
Right.
that you have really wide-ranging tastes, and even when it's something that is not really your thing, that you can appreciate it, because it's not it's the opposite of being a pop musician or a jazz musician. You're not looking to like hone a specific style. You're looking to be a chameleon of sorts. You're looking to be able to be very adaptable
Right.
and do lots of different things. So yes,
Yes. And
I,
listening. Listen, a lot of listening.
hello, David. Thanks for accepting our invitation to participate of the festival. And I want make a question linked with this subject. When you make the soundtrack for Heaven's Gate, you you was very young.
Yes.
That you 22, 23 years age, I suppose. And Heaven's Gate was a big super production, very expensive, very, very big. It's epic. How was your experience so young making the soundtrack for a big super production in the first time? I think that was a big challenge.
Well, it was, but I had a very gentle introduction to it. For one thing, although it was an epic production, the score was very intimate and very small. You know, and also it was in a style that I was extremely comfortable with. You know, that drew a lot upon my background, my personal background, and further, I was originally hired to be a musician on camera in the film, in the production. I spent 6 months on set.
wow.
I was in the film. I'm in the band, and I have a character that has a few lines. So I was so intimately familiar with everything on the production that when in post-production, when it turned out that I was going to write the music, it wasn't a shock. I wasn't coming in cold. I already, was so intimate with all the details of the film that it made it much, much easier, to be coming into such a big production. It wasn't intimidating. I was already familiar with, with everybody, with everything, with, creatively what was in the film. It was really a very gentle way to be brought into into this kind of thing. Also, this was before computers, so everything was slow. A massive film like this, there was so much footage. I can't remember how long the post-production period was, but it might have been a year.
Wow.
Not like it is today, where it might be 2 months. So there was lots of time to learn. There was lots of time to, to experiment and get things right. There was no time pressure for me. And so that also made it just an excellent, drawn out learning experience. And also the nature of the post-production process, because it was so long and so drawn out, sometimes I would write a piece of music and Michael would take the music and go back into the editing room, and he would change the picture to better fit with my music.
Whoa.
That never happens in American films.
Yes.
Never. I mean, that sometimes, certain European, directors that, that might work with a composer, where they work with them, like starting in the script stage and through production, like they might be more interactive relationship. But in American films, the film is done. They bring a composer, the composer puts his music on, and they would never change a frame of the picture to accommodate music. So it was very, very unusual. It was unique.
Yes.
And meanwhile, that year I came from knowing nothing about film scoring really to really, it was like going to school.
Yes, and the music is like amazing. I'm a big fan of the movie and the music, and it's really impressive how it translates the storytelling. And once you said that the instrumentation prompted a palette for the score, the choices that you made, you had a palette. So when you think about the instrumentation for a film score, how do you make those decisions?
Well, it's hard to analyze it too much because it is very intuitive. But after all these years, I know that's one of the first goals is to find the palette. And also once I decide upon it, to try and really discipline myself to not go outside it too much. Heaven's Gate was easy in a way because there was music in the film. The actors sang songs, like the band that I was in on film, we played a couple of songs. I mean, like, the sound of the film was already in the source music. So I just expanded on that a little bit, added a few other instruments, and they were all instruments that I play. So, it was all very natural. But yeah, these days, I mean, it's a complex thing about just deciding what the palette is going to be. Like it's the characters, it's the story, it's the setting, it's the place and time. Like it's whether the score is going to be kind of very internal and playing a lot of subtext, or whether it's really going to just be amplifying emotions that you already see on the screen more. So I'm afraid it's hard for me to really delineate exactly what the process is, except to say that it's critical and also very intuitive.
Right.
And in Heaven's Gate, there is an impressive scene. For me, it was impressive when a young musician in a ball walk in a skate in the same time that he play a violin. This is a thing possible.
Yeah.
I discovered that you was the boy playing violin and sliding on the skate. How do you make it?
Well,
It is wonderful.
I think let me see what year it's 2022 40. I think it's been 43 years since we shot that scene, and it still comes up. People still find it on the internet and talk to me about it, and it's really it's fun. Like, in fact, at one point, I don't know if in Brazil the cartoon show The Simpsons is popular, but they did an episode where they caricature, they parodied that scene.
Oh, that's great.
They drew me on skates, and
Oh, that's awesome.
with Homer Simpson and Marge Simpson, who were going on a date to a roller skating rink. Anyway, so it just never dies. But that was also, I mean, the way Michael worked in that film, the fact that he took 6 months to shoot that film. We all spent every day practicing, taking lessons. I took lessons on how to drive a buckboard, how to ride a horse, how to shoot a gun. And then every day for months, roller skating practice.
Wow.
And luckily I wasn't a bad skater when I was a kid, so I didn't have to start from nothing. I don't know who thought of the idea of me playing violin while I roller skated, but to me, I mean, I was 22 years old. It seemed like a lot of fun. And so, and we, I think, shot that scene for maybe 3 days.
Wow.
So, there was, let me just say, there was a lot of work that was put into it. There was a lot of time to practice. And also it's something that, I had a little bit of ability to do beforehand. And I, had a lot of fun doing it.
I suppose.
I mean, in the same scene, I don't know if anybody notices, but Jeff Bridges also plays a violin on roller skates.
Yes.
But Jeff, his character is supposed to be drunk. Mm-hmm. So he falls down on his violin and breaks it. And after the scenes that night, I would take his broken violin back to my hotel room and glue it back together for the next day. But I mean, he couldn't, but everybody had stuff they did. There was another guy who juggled while he was skating. We did all kinds of things. I got the best part, that everybody was doing things.
Yeah, that's an amazing scene.
It is. It's really fun. There's a lot of joy in that scene.
Yes. I think we could watch a scene from the movie. What
yeah.
Do you think? Okay.
That's a good time to do that.
So
if someone don't watch this scene of the skate, this is on YouTube.
Very easy to find.
Yes, and is a very good scene to watch.
Yes.
About your collaboration with Michael Cimino, for me, your music has a very emotional character, and your music is very emotional and very melodic. And the movie of Michael Cimino, that was wonderful. I love the movies of Michael Cimino. They was very strong, very, very dramatic. And how do you make this difference, the delicate of your music and the strong, the brute of Michael Cimino movie? I don't know if I was able to explain.
I'm not sure I'm completely understanding. You're saying that Michael having a very strong approach to his movie making? Can you explain a little more?
Um, the movies of Michael Cimino are beautiful, but are very violent.
Ah, I see. Yeah, they can be, yeah.
And your music, beautiful and intimate and delicate.
Yeah, I think that when he used me as a composer, that really, you know, like it was the emotional, melodic parts of what I did that I think that that he really leaned upon. Because if you're really being drawn into, like, say, like a love story, or you know, or the, you know, the emotional life of the characters, when you have a violent scene, it's going to have that much more of an effect. And in the movies that I did with him, very rarely did I need to do anything to point up something that happened on screen that was disturbing or violent. Usually the acting, the filmmaking, you know, carried that by itself. It didn't usually need musical help. So I really had another job often on his films.
Right.
I mean,
So,
I could think of a couple of instances, like, you know, like on, you know, once or twice on some dramatic scenes in his pictures where I would score it, but usually it tended to be, you know, more of the you know, the melodic inner life of the characters that I was scoring.
right.
Okay.
So let's watch a scene from Heaven's Gate. What do you think, João?
Yes.
Okay? Okay, Dave.
Yeah.
There is some trouble here. One moment, please.
Oops. Technical problems.
It's the online world.
In the time that I tried to solve the problem, one question.
Yeah.
There are composers that like of, when it's possible, of course, of first read the screenplay, others like of start the work before the shot, and the others don't like of read the screenplay and they prefer only watch the movie. How do you work when you are making a new soundtrack?
Well, really, it depends on the way that the production is working. I mean, the normal way that I work is the way that most American composers work, where the editing is very close to, well, maybe not being done, but they've got a very good rough cut already, and then they start thinking about the music, and that's the first time that I'm exposed to it. And it's rather quick. But there are occasionally I've worked with other people. I mean, I've done a lot of films with the Mexican filmmaker Arturo Ripstein.
Yes. Really
Yeah.
beautiful.
It's still a beautiful scene. What can I say?
Yes, beautiful music too.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, that scene, I think that was sort of the key to my working on the score. You see that the melody from that, it's a traditional Ukrainian folk song.
Mm.
And it was actually sung by one of the characters in one of the other scenes. And when Michael was in the editing room, he was actually meeting with other composers. And I took that music and I made an arrangement of it. I just sort of anonymously submitted it to him. And he didn't know it was from me. And he started playing with it against the picture and against that scene. And just discovered the power that it had of having this very, very emotional folk song kind of thing against an intimate scene like that. And he decided he wasn't, I mean, he was meeting with all of the big names at that time. He met with Morricone, he met with John Williams, he met with everybody. And he decided, no, I'm not going to go big, I'm going to go small. And this scene was what set it in motion. And so it was completely backwards from the usual situation. I gave him this music, he put it to this scene, and then we, after that point, we started to work more in the normal way, where a scene needed music and I would write some music. And so a wonderful example of what happens when a director and a picture editor and a composer work hand in hand, and one thing informs the other, and it's not just one way.
Right.
It's not just unidirectional.
Yes. Yes, a beautiful scene.
So,
And-
you know, it was great, you know, it was wonderful to be able to have a process like that.
Right.
And then when we put that music over that scene, we knew what the score was, what the film was. Everybody knew.
Yes, that helped a lot, I imagine.
Yeah.
And I have a question. A lot of your film music have like beautiful melodies. You have like such a talent for melodies. And nowadays, a lot of movies, we don't have a lot of melody. You have more like ambience music or textures. What's your opinion about like, what's the role of a melody in a movie, the themes?
Well, I mean, honestly, I think that the film dictates whether it's really a melodic score or whether it's something that's more textural. And you just have to be sensitive to that. But on the other hand, there are, you know, fashions develop, you know, and cliches develop, you know, and so there are certain, you know, ambient textures that just become popular, especially in television.
Right.
You know, and so I think, you know, the problem is with people reaching for an effect that's worked before too quickly.
Yes.
I think, you know, like that's, you know, and one of those effects has been not only ambience but also drones, you know.
Yes.
So popular in so many genres of film and television. And you know, I think that just people reach for them, and not composers necessarily. I mean, I'm talking about directors. They reach for that effect too quickly and too easily.
Right.
It doesn't mean that these pictures need a melodic score. but I think that there would probably be quite a number of more melodic scores if there wasn't that tendency to sort of copy what other people are doing.
Right. Yes. Maybe sometimes the directors are afraid of melodies.
Well, yes, I mean, I've done plenty of scores where the directors get nervous at the end and they play the music very low because, like they're basically scared of making a strong statement. And melody would be something that, falls into that category, definitely. I mean, you have to unashamedly and strongly know the effect that you're reaching for, and then do it. You can't be trying to, what we say, hedge your bet and do the safest thing.
Right.
And a melody in a score draws attention to itself. Film music should never take you out of the picture and draw attention to itself. So that also makes it risky, because if it's a melodic score, it really has to be right. Otherwise, it's going to take center stage, and then you have a big problem.
Yes.
So again, it may be easier to do something that's a bit of a cliche, like, okay, we'll do the drone thing. It's safer and easier.
Yes.
Are you working in some new projects in this?
I just finished a new project that was a lot of fun and something different for me, in a way. It's a limited series that's coming out on Showtime in a few weeks. It's about the country singers, American country singers, George Jones and Tammy Wynette. It's called George and Tammy. It's 6 episodes, and the score for it, it's very much of their world of sort of 1960s Nashville. There's a lot of pedal steel guitar. There's a lot of I used a lot of very echoey 6-string bass. It was a lot of fun to work on, and the score completely grows out of their music. The romantic themes don't have strings. The romantic themes, might have viola and pedal steel.
Wow.
Anyway, it was a lot of fun to work on. I'm really happy about it, and we'll see what happens in a couple weeks when it comes out.
Yeah, I would love to watch it. And you
also it should. I think that the Showtime and Paramount Plus are going to put some promotion behind it, because the stars of it are Jessica Chastain and Michael Shannon. So I think they are very excited about it.
It's great. And you also have been doing streaming concert series, the Fallout Shelter. That's awesome.
Well, during COVID, we were all stuck in our houses, and all of us musicians. I mean, I'm a performing musician too, a recording and performing musician.
Yeah.
And it was so difficult to be isolated and not to play music.
Yes, that's really hard.
So yeah, I didn't, I that's when I started doing that from my house. At first people were scared to do it, but we were very careful. The engineer was in a different part of the house. We wore masks until we started to play. But then everybody was so grateful. You know,
Yes.
at that time, it's hard to remember now, 2 years ago, what it was, how bad it was.
Yes.
You know, but I mean, I had friends of mine who were driving 2 hours to come to my house to play. You know, because we were all, and it felt so good, because even though you couldn't see the audience, once you pressed that record button or that broadcast button, you couldn't stop.
Mhm.
You know, you knew the audience was out there even if you couldn't see them. So it felt like you were connected somehow. So it was really wonderful. In fact, one of the concerts I did, I ended up making an album with the people that it grew out of that. We, you know,
Mhm.
during COVID, I made a couple records from projects that grew out of that concert
Oh.
series.
Oh, that's
And,
great.
and you know, and now COVID, you know, it's much less, it's more manageable, and I'm back to work and I have no time to do those concerts anymore. But
Oh,
it was there were some wonderful things about that time, you know, about being inventive and finding ways to still make some music.
yes, and I believe that even with like it was really a difficult time, but it showed how art and music is important to us, and how we needed to have it. Like,
Yeah, we all became very aware of that all over again. I mean, we always are, but it really pointed it out to, you know, all of my musician friends, certainly, you know. And like, you know, I'm friends with an English musician named Richard Thompson, who did one of my shows. And early on in COVID, barely out of lockdown, he did one himself from his apartment.
oh,
And I was watching it, and he had like 15,000 people watching him,
wow.
because people were so, they needed it so much.
Yes. Yes.
So it was
And
it was some good things about it. Yeah.
yeah. And as you said, you worked with a lot of musicians recording and making tours. And
Yeah.
how do you think that experience was important for you as a film composer?
Well, these days, I mean, film music is so wide ranging. I mean, like, you know, as a film composing, when it started in maybe the 30s, it was basically knockoffs of opera.
Yes.
You know, and it was done in America largely by European composers,
Right.
and it wasn't considered very honorable work. But that is a long time ago. You know, that's nearly 100 years ago, and every kind of music finds a place in a film or a television score these days. You know,
Yes.
like, I mean, like, I'm thinking back to in the 1960s when Mike Nichols did The Graduate, and he hired Simon and Garfunkel to do the score, and it was just them humming with a couple of acoustic guitars.
Yes.
That, you know, that song Mrs. Robinson, and it worked great. It was a
Yeah.
great score. You know, like, all, you know, all the restrictions were off. So these days, I can, you know, I did a score last year for a scripted podcast for Audible. It's called The Big Lie, starring John Hamm from Mad Men, and it was sort of a noir score. You know, like, it was strings and trumpet and all that kind of stuff. You know, traditional in many ways.
Mhm.
But this music that I was doing for the George and Tammy show, it drew on my experience as a player as much as a composer. You know, either I might be performing stuff myself, or if I was writing something for somebody else, it's because I understand them as a performer. It was small ensemble stuff. It was, you know, Americana, you know, idiosyncratic country music or folk music instruments. You know, like, it's coming out. It's coming largely out of, as much out of playing as it is out of composing, out of both, really.
Right.
And also these days, as opposed to, when I started, before computers and all that, all of the technical impediments to putting music and film together are gone.
Yes.
I mean, I was talking with a friend of mine, a guy named Snuffy Walden, who wrote music for The West Wing. And we were talking about when we started out, we had a big, thick book, a click book. I don't know if you know what a click book is.
Yes.
But it's tables. It's tables where you take time and tempi, and it matches them up so you can figure out at a certain time what beat of your music will fall, and so you can pick the right tempo to catch the most pieces of action with the thing, and that was how you had to synchronize music.
Yeah, that sounds crazy.
And also, back in those days, in the earlier days, composers, they might see the film, screen the film once or twice, then their music editor would go and take notes about where music had to be, and they would go away, they would write the score, and they would write the score to the music editor's notes, the timing notes, with a click book and a pencil and paper. And you might not see the music matched up with the picture until they got on the scoring stage.
Wow.
It's so different from today, where I was fond of I knew him, Michael Kamen, a bit. We were friends, and I remember talking to Michael and how he sort of like, there was that horrible thing about how sometimes you do a score and then it gets thrown out. Producers decide to redo it, and they hire a new composer, and the composer has to write a 2-hour score in 15 days.
Yes.
And Michael was saying how he sort of loved that, because he would just get the film and he would just start sitting at the keyboard with the synthesizer and just start improvising and recording, and then it would all go out to the orchestrator, and the immediacy of it, was sort of exciting to him. And working that way, he still did amazing work. He was a wonderful composer.
Yeah.
But because the technical thing had removed any impediments, you could do something like that. I mean, like the way we can edit music today. I mean, it just wasn't possible back then.
Yes.
The way you can change music after it's been recorded so that it fits a different, timing, all of those things. So it's a very different, the process has changed so much over the last, 40 years, 50 years. And there's a place in film scoring for all kinds of musicians.
Yeah.
Jazz musicians, classical musicians, pop musicians, Johnny Greenwood.
Yeah.
There's room for all kinds of people. It's different.
Yeah. Totally different.
It just has to be good.
Yeah.
The composer, whatever their genre is, whatever their strength is, whatever their weakness is, they just have to have a feeling for story, for film, for drama.
Yeah.
Dave, you have many wonderful scores, but there is one that I love especially, the of the Dragon. That is a very and your music. The story of the movie talks about many cultures There is an Oriental, Japanese characters, and your music reflects this cultural fusion. How was your work in the soundtrack of the Year of the Dragon?
Well, I mean, I loved working on it because, I mean, I was still very young, but that was my first real orchestral score, and to be able to, you know, work in a room with 70 or 80 players, it's just thrilling. But actually, you know, like, you know, the Chinese musical influences in that score were fairly modest. You know, I mean, like, quite a few of the quite a lot of the music that I wrote, you know, like for that movie, it was more traditional kind of, you know, European influence or classical influence music. And there was also a fair amount of synthesizer too. But so, I mean, it was a wonderful experience to work on. But you know, like, it wasn't a heavily ethnic score really. It just had little influences here and there.
Yeah, maybe
You know,
percussion.
I mean,
right?
like there was a scene where they're exploring in a subterranean soybean basement, and you know, and so I wrote a little score that, like, really it's more or less classical, but there was little parallel fifth things going on that sort of sounded vaguely Chinese. That's about as far as I went.
Yeah, maybe the opening with the
And the
percussion
opening,
also.
and yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there's also beautiful themes with the acoustic guitar and orchestra. That was really beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I was, you know, I was a big fan of the late Stanley Myers, who worked on Michael's film before I met him. He worked on Deer Hunter,
Mhm.
and I always, you know, so I love that acoustic guitar with orchestra kind of thing. I love to listen to it.
Before you say this, I was thinking that in the soundtrack, my preferred guitar solos, guitar music in music for films are the Deer Hunter and the Year of the Dragon. The two I
Oh,
love.
thanks. Thank you. Yeah, Stanley was really wonderful. He was really wonderful. I miss him.
Do you want to show the other clips, the other video?
Yeah, why don't we, for something, this is this is a main title sequence, but you know, a lot of these, like Year of the Dragon was a lot of it was a very big score. A
Yeah.
lot of some of the other movies I did with Michael, like The Desperate Hours or The Sicilian, was basically opera. This is a string quintet, just a quintet. And it's a little minimalist, but I hired some wonderful, wonderful string players from the New York Philharmonic, and I just like how it came out. I like working on a small scale too.
Yeah. So let's watch it.
Yeah.
Yes. The connection for me is qual que é a conexão aqui tá falhando um pouco. Qual que é o filme que ele pediu?
Oh, he's asking about the name of the clip.
Ah, The Name, ok.
It's
No,
Sophie.
Yeah.
Sophie.
That's it.
Sophie.
Yes.
Are you watching?
Yeah, you can put play.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Just the wonderful experience of working with the small ensembles, really rewarding.
Yeah, it's amazing how like with a few instruments you get like a sound that's already resolves the scene.
Yeah. Well, this was also it was a very intimate story, this woman's story, and so it was a way to do something that was very interior.
Yeah. Yeah, totally felt that.
Nice.
And David, I'm sure we have a lot of film scoring students watching us right now. What's the one best piece of advice you want to give to a composer that wants to start working in this business?
Well, I don't know that I have much business advice particularly, because I mean, my career was so unorthodox, and and there's so many, there are not a lot of opportunities,
Yeah.
commercially. I mean, especially in commercial Hollywood style films, just a smaller group of people kind of sweep up most of the
Yeah.
jobs. It's all of the successful composers have a team working for them.
Yeah. A
And
lot of
so,
people.
yes, they've all got a staff, so they can take on 6 films at a time.
Yeah.
But it's, I really would say that it's focusing on the craft. I mean, there are tons of people making movies and making film, just because they have to. I mean, like, there are first-time filmmakers that instead of, the independent film business that used to exist, say, in New York, doesn't exist the same way anymore. But there are people who are making, wonderful work, and stuff is being streamed, stuff is, there are still lots of ways to learn your craft because there's lots of people making work.
Right.
And the practical side of it is that while you're trying to hone your craft and make connections, because that's really what it all ends up being, is these personal connections. But just be as versatile as you can, because you're going to need to shift from one thing to another. I mean, like, if you're a performer, keep practicing your instrument, keep performing and recording, you're going to need it. But also in composing, all of these skills inform each other. They'll all become useful at one time or another.
Yeah.
That's about what I could say, I think.
Yeah, it's a great advice.
I mean, just, the other thing is, because when I was younger, fell victim to this. Don't go chasing after styles that you think are more commercial because you think that's a way in, because for one thing, I learned this, like, sometimes you hear a style of music and it's in a successful film and you think, oh, that's terrible, I could do that, easily, but the thing is, the person who did it doesn't think it's terrible. They love it.
Yeah.
They were, and you're never going to, by copying what they're doing, compete with what they get from loving what they do so much.
Yeah.
So the only way you're going to be actually competitive is do something you love doing a lot. That will make you competitive, not being able to do something like somebody else. Unless you happen to love that thing as much as they do, then yes, you have a chance.
Yeah, I believe you need to be true to yourself, right? Musically.
Yeah, well, that like, when your heart isn't in it and you're doing it for commercial reasons, it comes through the music.
Yeah. I agree.
People will hear it, even if they don't know what they're hearing.
Yeah. And we'll feel it too.
They'll feel it. Yeah.
And what about Brazilian music? I saw that you have done things with Toninho Horta. Can you talk a little bit about it?
Well, that was one night. I spent a few years playing with the wonderful musician Bobby McFerrin.
Oh yeah.
And so we did some touring in Brazil. I think we played that town where he lives, up in the north. What is it? Begins with a B. I can't remember at the moment, but
Belo Horizonte, no? Where Toninho Horta mora. Onde o Toninho Horta? Belo Horizonte?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
And so he came and played, and we had a wonderful time. But I mean, when I was a kid, like, not a kid, young. I mean, like, I remember hearing the score for Black Orpheus for the first time. I just couldn't believe it.
Great.
Anyway, I hope I have a chance to come back sometime soon. I had such a wonderful time. And that's the other thing. I remember, it's like Bobby McFerrin, he has an incredible rhythm sense, very sophisticated.
Yeah, he's
very,
amazing.
very sophisticated rhythm sense. And so we would do stuff. There's a lot of improvisation, and we would do stuff. And in America, I think they were getting it, but I can't tell. In Brazil, they start clapping along. And even if he's like doing something like in a fast 13 or a 9 or something, you know, like an odd meter, you know, that the Americans couldn't even count it, and the Brazilians are clapping along. So that was so much fun.
Yeah,
They
sounds like.
they totally could keep pace with him.
Oh, that's great.
They could keep up with him easily.
You should
And
come back.
and the Americans can't.
You should come back and play again here.
Definitely. And also, there's music everywhere.
Yeah,
You know, that's another thing that's lovely about it.
Yeah.
yeah.
David, the time is running.
Okay. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you for inviting me.
Tomorrow, Saturday, the Sinfonietta Orchestra, chamber orchestra, strings orchestra, will play your music and the music of the other west of the festival. Your music, the music of Rachel Portman, Christopher Gordon, John Land, and the Brazilian West, Nivaldo Ornelas and Túlio Mourão, two composers of soundtracks that was members of the same group of Toninho Horta. Toninho started the career in a group in Belo Horizonte, my city, where I live, with Milton Nascimento and older musicians like Nivaldo Ornelas and Túlio Mourão that will have music played tomorrow also.
Exciting.
In São Paulo and online in the same time.
Wonderful.
For come virtually to the festival. Was a pleasure for our association, for the festival, for me to talk with you. And I wish that in the future we could come in person to Brazil.
Yes, I hope so too.
Do you want say something for the end of the talk?
Well, just I appreciate all of you. You know, I appreciate you inviting me and also, you know, listening to this, you know, our little talk. I hope there was something interesting there, and you know, we need great music makers and great music listeners. So let's just all keep doing it.
Yeah, we want to hear more of your music.
Thank you.
And I would like to thank again Marcos Souza, the president of our association, Santa Marcelina University, Renan at the transmission, Marta and Ricardo that helped us with the translation, and of course, David and the audience that stayed with us until now. It was a great pleasure.
Same here.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.